Welcome to the Hello Seattle podcast, a local perspective on living in and moving to Seattle.
Yeah, we're excited to introduce you to people, places, and communities that make living in our hometown special. Hello, Seattle. I am your host, Dan Keller.
And I'm your host, Zach McDonald, and we're going to have some fun today. We got with us Ryker Young, Roosevelt Builders LLC, and also a good friend and former neighbor. Kind of sad that we're not neighbors anymore, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you've been building houses and remodeling houses and doing pretty much everything with real estate, which is pretty cool. So,
well, we're talking about something really relevant right now. So we've talked about this before, Zach, where we have a massive housing issue in America. I talked about some stats the other day from 2007, and in 2007, we had, get this was crazy. We had about 300 million Americans in the United States of America. And at the time in 2007, there was about almost 4 million active listings. Now you fast forward to 2024, we have 340 million Americans, and we have less than 1 million active listings in America. So we've got, do the math on that, 40 million more people, 3 million less homes for sale. So that screams housing issue. Seattle's doing something about it. And guys like Ryker and guys like you and I are advocates to even doing something more about it. And so today is all about how they're helping solve for the housing issue in Seattle relative to, we're not going to talk about ADUs, but DADUs, DADUs. Some people call them backyard cottages, but we've got, in my opinion, this guy's a pro. This guy's an expert at it. So why not bring in the pros to talk about something that I believe is kind of the future of housing and affordable housing in Seattle.
yeah, I mean, what you guys are building is something that people can afford, and it's new.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Roosevelt Builders and what you guys have been doing with some of these projects, and we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, guys. Roosevelt Builders is the development and construction entity at Real Property Associates, where Zach hangs his broker's license, and I'm a broker there as well. We've been doing a lot of things in real estate since I began at RPA in 2012. We started with the foreclosure market. I was at the auction house Friday mornings for years, buy-in trustee auctions, sheriff sales, all up and down Kings, Snohomish, and Pierce County. And then a couple of years ago, Seattle specifically changed their DADU and ADU laws to allow for some pretty unique things. The first thing that they allowed was that there was no owner occupancy requirement. So they did not require anymore that an owner needed to live in the primary house or the accessory unit if they were to build a DADU. The second thing they allowed was non-common ownership. So that opened the door to what most developers are doing now in Seattle, which is this condo process that happens at the statewide level. So in Seattle, about 2019, 2018, we saw that this law had changed, and we saw quite a bit of an opportunity where many homes in Seattle, obviously Seattle's an older city in our state, they have all these platted neighborhoods with alleys, access to side yards because properties are on corners, little houses in the front, or you could do kind of a flag lot orientation and get to the backyard. And so we saw a ton of opportunity for these DADU structures to be constructed on properties in Seattle and then ultimately sold as condos. So that's what we decided to do when we branded publicly as Roosevelt Builders a few years ago. And we've really taken the market by storm in Seattle specifically. We've done 3 or 4 dozen new construction DADU projects in Seattle, and we've got a ton more in construction on the horizon. So
yeah, I'm on your website, and some of these are just, I'm looking at them going, this is not what you think in regards to quote unquote backyard cottage or my, I guess, understanding of what a DADU would look like. I mean, these look like full on, obviously it's in a picture, but full on houses. And so we'll talk about specs here in a minute, but these are 1,000 square foot, 3-bedroom, two-ish bathroom houses, right?
Yeah. You can do a lot of different things in that 1,000 square foot max footprint. That is a parameter that Seattle does set. You can't build more than 1,000 finished square feet. That does not include garage square foot. And there's all kinds of different requirements. There's lot coverage requirements. You know, Seattle doesn't want your entire lot to be covered by physical structures. You need to worry about storm water and all kinds of different drainage requirements. But nonetheless, if you have all of the options at your disposal, you can build up to 1,000 square feet with a garage in addition to that.
Yeah.
And you can do, 2 bedrooms in that footprint. You could do 3 bedrooms in that footprint, and then you can squeeze, 2 or 3 bathrooms into that footprint and make it pretty livable.
Yeah, I love this. So while we're on this, before we kind of move on, Zach, I think it's important, if you're listening, I think people, when they hear the word condo, they think of like downtown Seattle, 75 units in a building. Condo, a lot of the times, because I'll finance, as a mortgage professional, I'll finance detached townhomes. So you're looking at these and you're thinking as a consumer, this is a detached, maybe single family home. But a lot of the times it has to, well, not a lot of the times, it always comes down to the zoning, right? Like how you actually develop the property. So let's talk about that real quick. Would you explain that you have an existing structure on a property, you buy the property with a house, typically, and then you develop the DADU in the front or the back of that property, separate to, it's not attached to the house, but you have to is the right word condominiumize or condomize?
Yeah, condoize, condo overlay, condominiumize. There's lots of ways to say it. Probably none of the words are official dictionary words, but
doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, what we saw in Seattle was that most Seattle homes have great architectural design. They're cute. They fit in neighborhoods. They're Tudors or craftsman houses, and they really make Seattle Seattle. And we felt like keeping the existing house as a structure and not torn down can continue to keep neighborhoods in Seattle. And so what we do is we purchase a property that has an existing house that can be maybe remodeled or kept, and then we permit a DADU on the property in maybe the backyard or the side yard. And then once we finish development at the state level, the Washington State Condo Act allows for any homeowner to basically create a condominium on their property. Condos do get a bad reputation for a variety of reasons. There's potential for homeowner association dues, squabbles with your neighbors, shared common elements, all of those things. And we like to dumb down the process to what people do understand, which is like a small lot short plat.
Yep.
So someone who purchases a DADU that we develop, they own the ground beneath them, just like you would if you purchased a home. You can do whatever you want on your piece of land. If you want to add a garden bed, you can do that. If you want to, have a pet, you can do that. If you want to have a little storage unit in addition for your bike or for some tools, you can do that. We don't have tons of rules and requirements, and there is a little bit more friction with your neighbor. There is a homeowners association that you and your neighbor are participants in, but it's very, very minimal in terms of what that actually looks like structurally. And there are some shared utilities. So you do share a water meter and a sewer line trunk with your neighbor. And so there are some shared costs associated with that to pay the bill and do a few things. But I think we've sold so many of these and we haven't really heard a ton of.
Yeah. So it lives like very similar to a short plat, right? You have your own separate, you're not sharing the whole entire property. It's very, very similar to a short plat. You own the land that your house, your DADU, or if you buy the front part, your house is on. It's how the state of Washington looks at it from a state and a county level, that it's a quote unquote condo. And then when you go to a bank to finance one of them, you don't have to go through the short plat process. You're just buying it as a condo.
Yeah, exactly. And
a detached condo.
Yep. And you can get normal, conventional financing, 30-year fixed or whatever you want to do. And there's no additional special requirements or hurdles to borrowing.
Love that.
You still have common elements though, right? Isn't there a requirement for that as well, that there's some common element?
You don't have to have a common element. We, as the developers, design the lot according to what's best for the lot. Typically, though, there is some shared walkway. For example, if a DADU is built in the alley and your friend parks on the street and they want to get to your alley DADU, there's usually a walkway 3 or 4 feet on the north or south or east or west, side of the property that we provide, and maybe we put some gravel there or a fence or something to delineate the area. But it's you're able to get from to walk, pedestrian to.
Got it.
Yeah,
man, I'm really impressed with some of these designs and some of the projects that you've done. If you want to, if you're listening to this, if you're on YouTube, I'm going to put some of these things up on screen. But if you are listening to this, I really encourage you to go to RooseveltBuilders.com. That's ROOSEVELT builders.com. Some of these projects are ridiculous. They do not. I'm like shocked. They don't look.
They look like a real
thousands.
house, right?
They do.
They look like a real house.
Yeah, these are crazy.
So Ryker, you're building these for yourself, right? You're buying the house, you're doing the build in the back, selling them separately, sometimes keeping them maybe. Mm-hmm. What would be the benefit to somebody building one themselves in their own backyard? I think of like, hey, cash flow. I think of, just the same thing as having a rental property. It's just on your own property. Maybe someday you could turn it into a condo and sell it, but you don't necessarily have to. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we have done, out of all the projects we've done, it's probably about a 75% to 25% ratio. 75% of the projects we have done on our own book, where we are purchasing the property as a speculative developer and trying to make it work numbers wise. Another 25 or 30% of our projects are done strictly as a general contractor for a homeowner that either one comes to us with a permitted plan. They've done the work themselves with an architect or with a designer or whatnot, and said, hey, we've got an approved plan to build a DADU. Can you look at this and provide us with a estimate for construction or whatever that relationship looks like, and we build it for them. Or we've done a situation that's more akin to a full service project manager, designer from the front end, where they come to us and they say, hey, I've got some capital. I want to either find a property that I can purchase and build a DADU on it, or I live in my property and I want help from beginning to end, from the design architectural piece to the exit strategy piece at the end, whether that looks like keeping it as a rental, keeping it as an Airbnb rental.
Yeah, I was just thinking Airbnb. That could be a great opportunity.
Yeah, we've done all of that. So we've built a couple of units that we've kept as Airbnbs in Seattle.
Yeah.
That has been an interesting success story in itself.
Yeah.
Just in-city Airbnbs, that's kind of another conversation all in itself, but they've been really successful. People love a new construction feel when they come into the city.
Yeah.
It feels like a hotel.
I'm looking at this, like I do a lot of mortgages for people that will rent out their basements or ADUs, if you will, to flight attendants, pilots, nurses, physicians, where it's short-term rental, same thing. So how cool would it be to offer, a hospital or the airline something like this? It's newer.
Yeah, and one of the risks with doing the short-term rentals in the short-term rental space is that they're totally seasonal and they're not really recession-proof. Like you're not going to travel on a ski trip if the economy's bad.
Yeah.
But grandma in the city of Seattle is still going to come visit if for her kids' grandparents' day.
Yeah.
And we've had, one of our units, it's been the same grandma has probably booked it 4 or 5 times because she keeps flying in from California to visit her grandkids, and she loves to stay in her own private space that's, a few blocks away from her family in Green Lake, and she, pays top dollar for that luxury.
Yeah.
And so, that's just one example, but keeping them as short-term rentals, is a good potential option. And obviously just as a long-term rental option, it works for a lot of folks as well.
So with you guys, you have options for people to come and either purchase them from you, start from scratch, full service, or even part-time service, if you will.
Yeah.
This is, there's so many options that you can do with this. We're starting to see right now that people are sitting on lots. Like I actually took a refinance application for someone the other day in Everett, and I was kind of talking with you about it, and it's like the perfect project for this. We got to see if it'll pencil, but same thing, alley in the back way. There's already a garage back there because they used to build these houses like that. House in the front, little craftsman in the front, detached garage in the back to an alley that you pull into your garage from. So, I think there's a lot of people that are sitting on projects like this that don't even know. So you guys would be a great resource for a consultation, for an estimate, all of that if you did own a home like this too, right?
And I was curious too, this would be helpful, I think, for people. What are you looking for when you're looking at these properties? Maybe you're, okay, what makes sense to buy versus maybe hold off on?
Yeah, well, there's 3 types of properties that work really well for a DADU project. The first is an alley accessed backyard. So Seattle has tons of these properties everywhere where you can drive down a paved or semi-improved alley and access your backyard. Well, those are perfect for DADUs. Many of the projects we've built, the front door faces that alley, and especially if it's paved, I mean, it looks like you're facing a street, and there's almost no difference. Yeah. Corner lots work as well. So again, Seattle has tons of those where you've got access off of the cross street into the backyard. Those really look like their own homes. I mean, you can almost not even tell that those are detached accessory units because of the lot layout. And the second, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it's called a flag lot style in our language. But ultimately that means that the house in the front is orientated to the side enough so that you can drive down the side off the main street and get to the backyard, and a development is done back there. And, you know, I think there's a lot of cities in the state of Washington that we can talk about, you know, what is next for DADUs in the state of Washington. But there's a lot of cities, Everett, Tacoma, and the like, that have similar plat in neighborhoods to like Seattle with those alleys and side yards, corner lots, those types of things. So.
It's an affordability option, right? Especially in Everett right now too, where you can actually live in Everett and get in under $500,000 or right around $500,000 versus 6, 7. So
we're running out of space, right? There's not a lot of places to build new developments unless you're going real far out. And, you know, there's still space, Lake Stevens and Snohomish and places like that, but that's going to run out too. But the in-city options, there's not a lot of those. So this is a great in-city option.
And I think a lot of people, you know, NIMBY, not in my backyard, is a term that's thrown about a lot in this new era of our housing crisis. And I think that the DADU opportunity appeases both sides of the aisle on this, because the houses really aren't that intrusive. They're not, you're not taking a single family lot in a neighborhood, tearing it down and building a massive 5-unit structure that looks like a towering apartment building. These are very neighborhood specific. They flow really well into the neighborhood, and you know, I think they're ultimately welcomed by a lot of the neighbors.
Now there are like preset plans, right, in Seattle that you can use as well. What are your thoughts about those plans and how they fit into the building process? Yeah,
back when Seattle adopted their new code that is written into stone now, they also allowed for architects to submit what they call pre-approved DADU plans. So there are a handful of pre-approved options which any homeowner can license for about $1,000. And those are really good options depending on what you're looking for. I think that the one thing that Seattle didn't understand at the time when they allowed for these pre-approved plans to come to fruition, they didn't realize that a lot of developers or homeowners would be trying to sell them as airspace condos. So some of the pre-approved options don't really apply to this purpose. They're more like a studio backyard unit or a 1-bedroom unit, maybe for your mother-in-law to come visit. They don't really fit the full, you know, sellable layouts.
Yeah, gotcha.
So there's a couple of pre-approved models. You see a lot of the Schooner plan available for sale even now. Those are obvious when you look at listings because they've got this double French door situation. Schooner, Schooner is how you say it. That's a very common pre-approved plan that is built in the city. But yeah, most of the projects that we do are more custom to the lot.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of custom designs on your current projects and then past projects. Let's take a moment and kind of explain the difference between why someone would go with a pre-approved plan versus a custom.
Yeah, well, custom plans far and away allow you to build a structure that best suits your lot. not all lots are created equal. There's lots of different variables from view to access to trees to site conditions. It's really hard to go and say that every, a DADU would work on this lot every single time. So we like to do the custom process because it allows us to maximize. But obviously, there is some ease of access to using a pre-approved plan, especially some of the smaller ones. If you're not looking to go full tilt and build 1,000 square foot structure that can be sold. And there's also relationships. I mean, construction and development is a total relational business, and finding a good architect is not easy, and having access to the pre-approved plans is a nice way to go. A lot of cities have kind of piggybacked off of Seattle and done this. So in Olympia, for example, there's a bunch of pre-approved plans. Everett's working on some pre-approved plans. So cities are definitely realizing that homeowners would benefit from a pre-approved option for cost, streamline.
So cost and obviously in time, 4 to 6 months versus maybe a year. But
how long does it take to build one of these?
Building them takes between 5 to 8 months for our team, depending on site conditions. If you've got a very flat pancake lot that's easily accessible by our construction team, we can go really quickly. Every single subcontractor just has such an easier time getting their job done on our sites. More complicated sites with, smaller lots, site constraints such as shoring walls or large excavating that needs to be done. Those things add time and cost. So then you're looking more, above 6 months to 7 or 8 months. But we build pretty quickly. There's not a ton of economies of scale on these DADUs, and Seattle's a big city. So, if you have a site in Magnolia and a site in Green Lake, that's a 30-minute drive. So it takes, we do them as fast as we can, but there are certainly some, every project has its own complications, but we try to do them as fast as we can.
What does it cost to build one of these? And I know that's a loaded question because there's so many variables, but if somebody was thinking about it, do you have a way that they could break it down and just have a rough idea for what this would look like if they were to have you build this for them?
Yeah. Well, now that we have, several dozen projects completed and available for view in our completed project section on our website, that's a great resource for people. I've directed some people there and said, hey, you don't know what you want to build, and so go to our website. And if there's a site or a project that looks really nice to you, and you want to see what that would cost, we can certainly give you some round numbers there.
Okay.
Cost on a DADU really depends. We can build them as cheap as $250,000 to $275,000, or if you're going to go full bore with 2 garage bays and a maximize 1,000 square feet with some site conditions, maybe a deck, whatever it might look like, that can easily get up into the $400,000 range. And so it just really depends on what the goal is for the client.
That makes sense.
And
Super cool. So you were talking about earlier, there are some other cities that are going to be adopting these rules. They already are. So where are some of the places where they've already adopted some of the rules? And then where do you think we're going to start to see more DADUs in the state? Because I think that's a big thing, the recent law changes.
Yeah, well, Seattle was really a pioneer in this space, as I mentioned at the beginning. They really opened up what was possible in the DADU space. So kudos to Seattle. I think a lot of times cities in development get a bad reputation for being difficult to work with or super complex or slow. But Seattle was a front runner in this, and I think it's definitely helped the state, which adopted 2 really forward-thinking laws last year. One is HB 1110. That isn't relevant to DADU ADUs. That's going to allow people to build basically up to 4 plexes on their single-family lot. Not something that I'm familiar with right now, but another law which is super applicable to the ADU, DADU space is HB 1337. HB for both of those laws stands for housing bill. And what HB 1337 is going to do is it's going to make it so that basically Seattle's law around ADUs and DADUs is going to apply to a lot of the cities in the state. Each city has a period of time to approve or change their code to adopt to meet HB 1337 standards. They have until the next their next Growth Act meeting or something. I don't know exactly the word, but it's basically between now and the end of 2025. So some cities are getting ahead of the game and making it happen. So Everett has done this now. You can build a DADU and condo in Everett. Kirkland has done this for a long time now. You can just do the same thing in Kirkland. And then a couple of other cities, Tacoma, Edmonds is actually they've had several meetings that I've listened in on around this. And, a couple of other cities. But ultimately, what is possible in Seattle is going to be possible, in most other local cities.
Yeah, I can see it being big in Everett, which they're already starting to do that. Linwood,
Linwood.
Olympia, Tacoma, some of those cities are, I'm looking at your 3 criteria, and just the corner lots in the back, the alley access that's how they used to build
the older cities, right?
The older communities.
You think of Edmonds, like there's parts of Edmonds that are newer, but a lot of the downtown area is older.
Yeah, any city that was platted pre-1950 or neighborhoods that were platted pre-1950 typically have some of the attributes that we're looking for. So it'll be interesting to see, as cities do adopt this new law, who is able to get in there and make it happen.
So I like this, our podcast is more centered and directed toward, maybe people relocating to the area, looking to buy in Seattle, wanting to maybe plant some roots in Seattle. I look at this as a huge opportunity. When you're looking for homes, maybe you don't have to develop and build a DADU right now, but if you want to get the most bang for your buck in a home that you're looking for, maybe look at homes that have this criteria, right? Or, if you have a little bit of extra money, reach out to some guys like you, develop the DADU. You can rent out the front, live in the back. I mean, there's just so many opportunities here, which have a bright future,
Yeah, I think that, as you mentioned, we're in a housing crisis and there's an affordability crisis. There's not very many homes for sale. Rates are creeping up and everyone is looking for this perfect marriage between home to live in and is it a good investment?
Yeah.
That is a really difficult marriage. It is really hard to find that. And I think that the DADU process and adds some hidden value in people's properties and some ways to make extra money. You could even not ever build the DADU in your yard, but you could maybe do the condo and sell off the backyard to someone who does want to do it. So I think there's going to be some really creative things going on in the next few years as this DADU stuff comes down the pipeline, similar to people getting creative and renting out their bedroom or an extra bedroom or making an ADU mother-in-law unit in the basement, things of that nature.
Yeah. Amen.
I feel like this adds way more value than having like a ADU in your basement, an attached versus a detached accessory dwelling unit.
Living with someone, this is the detached aspect of it is genius. The other part of it is we get a lot of people, Zach, that are like, hey, I'm looking for a deal. Help me find a deal. So what you just mentioned, this is an opportunity where
find a deal.
It doesn't necessarily scream on paper deal. I got something for $50,000 off list price. This is something greater than that potentially.
Yeah. Where you're trying to manufacture value from your property and thinking creatively, thinking outside the box, staying in line with the times.
I love it.
Pretty cool. Well, Ryker, thanks for joining us today. Super, super helpful, beneficial. I learned stuff today. I know we've had conversations about this and really grateful for you joining us. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me on. And if you guys have any questions, about DADUs in Seattle or otherwise, I'm available through the website or through my contact information, which I think Zach and Dan can post. And I look forward to chatting with you guys. Yeah. Roosevelt Builders LLC. Thanks for being on here, Ryker. Goodbye, Seattle. I appreciate it.